E-mobility is the key pillar of Volkswagen's forward strategy, the most important lever for electric mobility. We will take a holistic approach and expand our e-mobility value chain. Our goal is to secure a pole position in the global scaling of batteries. We will make charging as easy as fueling by strengthening our charging network in Europe, the United States, and China. And we will combine mobility and energy management.
Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So as you heard, Herbert Diess just made some pretty big announcements with VW that they are really super, basically they're all in on battery electric vehicles. Weirdly, in a sort of confluence thing, I was looking at another announcement from just a few days ago about American Electric Power and Duke Power and a whole bunch of, it's a consortium of 6 Eastern and Middle American power companies that are all getting together to create sort of a Mondo grid. I guess something like what Tesla's doing with their superchargers, but basically they're looking to kind of blanket the east coast of the United States into the central part, the southeast, etc., with chargers, fast chargers, to allow cars, battery electric cars, to be able to charge much, much more conveniently. So hopefully by 2030, I think it is, that things will get more like gas stations, I guess, right? So that's what we're looking at. So big things afoot in terms of the battery electric vehicle market, so I figured I would talk about all of that today. So let's start with Volkswagen and Herbert Diess. This is really off the cuff, like literally I'm doing this like as we speak. I'm like, oh geez, this is really interesting stuff. So I just wanted to give initial reactions. There is, in the part that I looked at the video, and I will link it in the description below if you're interested, there's an awful lot of, corporate speak, right? So there's synergies, and there's all the stuff about how great their architecture is and how many vehicles they sell and the fact that they sell more than anybody else. So it's a little bit of a pissing contest. But anyway, there is some interesting information tucked in there, so I thought it would be worth going over. So first of all, what is the big announcement from Volkswagen? The big announcement is that they are going to go to a single unified cell format, I think battery architecture. I think the whole thing is going to become one unified element. At the very least, it's a little hard to tell because there's so much corporate speak involved, but that's what it appears to be, and that is a huge yay.
Now we are applying the same principle to battery technology. We will focus on one standard battery. From 2023 onwards, we will be ready for rollout. By 2030, one cell format will cover 80% of the use cases within the group. The one size fits almost all cell design and high scales will radically reduce battery costs. In our entry segment, the unified cell will bring down battery costs by 50% compared to today.
I'm a big fan of Herbert Diess. I think that he has a very, very difficult time with Volkswagen because they're such a kind of stodgy group or company, but he's very forward looking and he is really, really pushing to get battery electric vehicles to be the thing. So anyway, what he's talking about is getting 80% of vehicles on the exact same architecture. Now, I don't believe that that is the same number of cells per battery pack, right? Because there'll be longer range ones and shorter range ones, etc. But I believe it'll be sort of like what Tesla's doing with their 4680 cells, which is basically that they'll have an architecture that works for almost all cases. Now, of course, 80% of vehicles is not 100%. If they're selling 10 million vehicles, that's still 2 million vehicles that are going to require something different, but I guess they may be talking about trucks or some other, commercial architecture. So anyway, it seems like it's probably pretty reasonable, and most consumer vehicles will be operating off of more or less the same architecture. Diess also talks about a 50% cost reduction in terms of how much batteries cost today versus how much they will cost in the future. I'm holding off on that point just one bit. But anyway, a 50% cost reduction is huge, right? I think the industry average right now is somewhere in the $160-ish range. It's a moving target a little bit. But anyway, if they can get that down to half of that, that makes electric vehicles flat out cheaper than gas-powered vehicles, right? The $100 per kilowatt hour is kind of the cutoff in terms of the cost differential between the two. In terms of sticker price, obviously cars, ICE cars are much, much more expensive to operate. It was kind of a weird thing. I had to go to the gas station today. We actually haven't driven our Mazda CX-5 hardly at all since we got our Tesla. And so I felt like I needed to drive it some and like utilize it, because otherwise the engine kind of gets stodgy after a while. And first of all, hated driving it. Oh my gosh, it's terrible to drive this thing after driving an electric car. Like a gas-powered engine, it doesn't have a consistent amount of power. It's like ga-jung, ga-jung, ga-jung as you push the gas pedal down, and just ridiculous. It feels so bad compared to an electric vehicle, so it's really hard to go back to that. But second of all, of course, going to the gas station was like a big shock. I was like, oh my gosh, I just spent a ton of money on this. And it's kind of wild to think about the fact that it costs almost nothing to drive our Tesla. And I really do mean that in Georgia, since it's 1 penny per kilowatt hour overnight. So I know most places in the world are not that cheap, but geez, it's almost an inconsequential cost to drive a Tesla in the state of Georgia. So anyway, back to Volkswagen's announcement. The question that I had, and which was answered later on, is that they're going to start this process in 2023 and complete it by 2030. Yeah, 2030 is a long, long time away. So not even really starting it until 2023, that's 2 years from now, or potentially 2.5 years from now, before they're even really starting this process. It seems to me, you know, he talked a lot about how they created this architecture for all of their battery electric vehicles in terms of the skateboard, the part of the thing underneath, so they can build different models on top of it. That's all cool. But in terms of batteries, you know, Diess talks about how forward-thinking Volkswagen is, but it feels to me like they're pretty far behind Tesla specifically, that they need to be looking at these battery architecture much, much faster than 2023 to 2030. In terms of production, Diess says by 2030, they intend to have 240 gigawatt hours in Europe specifically. He said 6 gigafactories, which was rather interesting. I thought he was kind of taking Tesla's term, which is, I mean, it's not copyrighted or anything, but I was like, that's an interesting thing to glom onto that term, because it's become very associated with Tesla. But anyway, 240 gigawatt hours, 6 gigafactories, 40 gigawatt hours in each, some of them which will be operated by Volkswagen, some of which will be in collaboration with other battery manufacturers. Of course, that all sounds well and good until you think about what Elon Musk at Battery Day said about needing like 3+ terawatt hours, so 3,000 gigawatt hours. So 240 is nice, but it's not that much. So anyway, again, it's all good if you think by like 2025 they were going to have that, but by 2030, that seems like it's perhaps not going to be enough. But anyway, it's a great start. I'm glad that they're planning on doing this. It looks like they're really starting to roll things out, and Volkswagen, at least under Dies's leadership, is, you know, begrudgingly moving into the future of electric vehicles. Also, Diess addressed kind of the elephant in the room, I guess, a little bit, and that is the question of how do people charge?
And we will make charging as easy as fueling by taking high power charging to the next level. We will multiply the number of fast charging points in Europe by factor 5 over the next 4 years, together with partners, to cover 1/3 of the demand by 2025. In the US and China, Volkswagen is building nationwide fast charging networks.
He says they're going to put 5 times more charging inside of the European area, and then they are building out nationwide networks in the United States and China, and they kind of had to do that. Electrify America is their punishment, part of their punishment for Dieselgate. So I love how they spin this as if they're doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because they have to do it. That was part of the deal. But anyway, it's still a positive sign that they are installing many, many chargers. And that sort of tails into the other announcement. I'm going to read this off of my computer. Forgive me for looking away for a second. But this is from American Electric Power, that's out of Ohio, based out of Columbus, Ohio. They are combining with Dominion Energy, Duke Energy, Energy Corporation, Southern Corporation, and Tennessee Valley Authority, or the TVA. And they're basically going to blanket the Atlantic coast from Virginia to mid-Florida, the Southeast, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, parts of Texas and Oklahoma, and West Virginia, Ohio, and Indiana. So it's a pretty big chunk of the country and quite a large percentage of the population, although it does not include places like New York and stuff. According to the article, which I'll link in the description, quote, "This is a plan to enable EV drivers seamless travel across major regions of the country through a network of DC fast chargers for EVs. The companies are each taking steps to provide EV charging solutions within their service territories. This represents an unprecedented effort to offer convenient EV charging options across different company territories and allow EV travel without interruption." End quote. So that's all super cool that it encompasses a large chunk of the United States. Perhaps other conglomerations will get behind this also and take over like the Northeast or the West Coast or something. But anyway, all of this is a really, really big positive because, of course, as we've discussed about in previous videos, I'll link a few of them up here, range anxiety is a huge issue for electric vehicle owners. And for people who are perhaps less for owners now because we realize it's not that big a deal, but for people who are thinking about getting into EVs, the fact that they worry about where they're going to go to get gas, right, to charge up is a big issue for people. And obviously the more different options there are with Electrify America and ChargePoint and Tesla and this conglomeration. So again, the more and more there are, and hopefully the United States will eventually standardize on a particular type of plug, because it is unfortunate that these plugs are different. And like I've said previously, it would be really weird if you had to go to a gas station that had a particular shaped hose that fit into your gas tank and you could only go to that particular gas station. So they need to work on having a unified architecture for that, for sure. But anyway, this is all to the good. This is only going to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy, right? To transitioning to battery electric vehicles. And also, I don't think these electric companies are doing this all out of the goodness of their heart, because think about it. They're probably thinking to themselves, wait, the days of oil's domination in terms of transportation, in other words, gasoline and diesel, is coming to an end. And we want to make a strong play to be the next gas stations, right? So they can become BP, or they can become Shell Oil or Marathon or Exxon or whatever. They can become these major players in this new industry because they are the people who produce electricity right now. So, you know, in a way, this might tend towards monopolistic behavior. I don't know. At present, it's kind of competition and it feels like a good thing, but I could see in the future this becoming more of a monopolistic move on these companies' parts, and they could kind of take over geographical areas and become monopolies, which they already are in terms of power production, right? Where I live, it's either Georgia Southern or Georgia Power. You've got two options about how you can get power, and actually your individual house doesn't have an option. So it's already a monopoly, but of course they're regulated, so that's a good thing. But you know, I could see these DC fast charging networks becoming to some extent deregulated, and these companies could make money grabs, which wouldn't be such a great thing. But anyway, I think that's for the future. For now, I'm just glad that more and more options will be developed, and hopefully there will be enough competition and enough consumer demand that all of this will continue snowballing, and we'll be able to make a fairly easy transition from gasoline powered engines over to battery electric vehicles in terms of charging. All right, in a moment, let's talk about how all of this affects Tesla. But first, if you enjoyed this video, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, subscribe for more of this. Also, as always, a huge thank you to my patrons on Patreon. You all are wonderful. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for the support. Speaking of Patreon support, Carlo, one of my Patreon patrons, was the one who sent me this video link today. And that's what started this video, because I was actually just going to do it on the electric grid in the United States. So thank you so much, Carlo. I appreciate it. And by the way, this is our 200th episode, which is kind of mind-blowing. So thank you all for watching. I really appreciate everyone watching. If you want to have some fun, our merch store is available. You can check the link. You can find t-shirts, you can find tumblers, mugs. They have logos. They have things like all input is error. They have the Tesla bot. You know, check it out, go shopping, have some fun. And finally, don't forget that we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how just a simple click and some shopping will help out the channel. Thank you. All right, so how do all of these announcements, particularly Diess's announcement with Volkswagen Group, affect Tesla? Well, first of all, I'm hearing an awful lot of future talk, right? There's talk from Diess about what they're going to do in 2023 or 2025 or 2030 or something. So that's a lot of future talk. the other piece of this is that a lot of what Volkswagen Group is talking about doing, and quite frankly, what this energy conglomeration is doing and everything in terms of building out a power grid, is stuff that Tesla has already been doing. Tesla has led the way, right? There's Tesla Superchargers all over the United States and all over Europe and all over China, and growing and growing and growing. So it's all to the good that there is going to be more competition and these other companies or other groups are doing this, but it's kind of catch up at this point to what Tesla's already been doing. As far as cost and everything is concerned, the 50% cost reduction that Diess talks about for Volkswagen Group in the future by like 2030 is stuff that it looks like Tesla will be getting to like now, I mean, in the near future, but they'll have most of their fleet rolled out to the 4680 battery cells within the next couple of years, and that's going to reduce their cost by 50% already. And already Tesla is below the industry average in terms of the cost per kilowatt hour at the pack level. Now, one thing that Diess did commit to that Tesla's kind of waffled about is vehicle to grid.
The electric car will become an integral part of the future energy system. Electric vehicles will become mobile power banks. They will bring the green energy transition to a new level. It will be possible to manage energy in and around your house in a smart way, reducing costs for the customer and optimizing the grid.
So Diess talked about in the future, their cars will be able to plug into your house and pass energy either into the house directly or back to the power grid, and you will get paid for that. So you could do energy arbitrage, which is what Tesla Powerwalls and Tesla Megapacks and things, well, the Powerwalls don't have the software enabled, but the Megapacks do. But the Powerwalls eventually will have arbitrage enabled, which means basically they can buy energy when the price is low and they can sell it back to the grid when it's high. And Diess is implying that that's going to happen with their automobiles as well. So he's saying they're basically mobile battery packs. And I know Tesla has talked about that in the past, but they've also kind of waffled about that. They haven't talked about it a lot in the recent past. So it will be interesting to see what happens with Tesla in that. And I really do like that idea. I love the idea that even in an emergency situation, that you could power your house or some important elements like your refrigerator during a power outage and maintain consistency with your electricity during an event or something, right? Even if it didn't come down to buying and selling power on a regular basis, the fact that you could do that under emergency circumstances would be super cool. So kudos to Volkswagen for doing that. As for the rest of it, as for building out a big electricity charging infrastructure, that's fantastic. As for reducing the cost of batteries, that's fantastic. As for building a unified architecture, that's all fantastic. I think a lot of this is happening kind of glacially slowly. I think that's it. I think a lot of these companies are thinking in terms of, because also this American electric power conglomerate is also looking at 2030, right? So they're all looking a decade out, more or less. And Tesla is saying, no, we got to do this in the next 2 or 3 years. So I think without Tesla and some of the Chinese startups around, this would feel like a reasonable timetable, but under the circumstances with Tesla and with NIO and with some other companies, Xpeng, etc., these guys are all moving way, way faster than any of these other companies are doing. And they're talking about doing this in 8 or 10 years. They need to be doing it in 2 or 3 years. And I know Diess is up against a huge wall when it comes to Volkswagen, and he's probably, he's moving mountains to make what he's making happen. And so I give him a lot of credit for doing that, but Volkswagen Group needs to wake up and smell the coffee, right? They need to realize that they need to move a lot faster than they're moving, or else they're going to get left behind. So anyway, this is all super, super good news, but all of these companies need to move faster. That's the big thing, or else they're just not going to catch the startups like Tesla and these Chinese startups. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and interesting. Again, this was super off the cuff. I just got the information and I was like, oh, this is too good to pass up, so I just went ahead and did the video real quick. So please do forgive me if there are any factual errors. I'll try to catch them in editing, or certainly you can put them in the comments. Anyway, please do let me know if you know anything different in the comments, and also, of course, ask me questions in the comments or at my email address, which is drknowitallknows@gmail.com.